Happy Wednesday, everybody. Today is September 30th. It is Wednesday, and I'm going to take you through your last notes of Unit 2 on the events surrounding Boston. So I'd like you to take notes and follow along for the ride. I'll also post this presentation in course materials in case you need to refer back to it. We're going to be talking about the Sons and Daughters of Liberty first this morning. The Sons of Liberty was a secret society created to fight taxation by the British government. They are our more violent or extra-legal protesters going into the revolution. They are founded by Sam Adams, who is John Adams' cousin. Other leaders include Patrick Henry, John Hancock, Paul Revere, all names you should recognize. They are usually the ones who led the resistance to the Stamp Act by harassing British tax officials and other tax collectors. They are known for setting fires, tar and feathering, as you can see in the picture here, and other forms of more violent and threatening protest. Their identities needed to be kept secret, so you, as a member, you would have known who other group members were, but usually kept your identity a secret from others so you wouldn't get in trouble. But they worked tirelessly to enforce the boycotts of British goods and always threatened retaliation against those who would not participate, including targeting loyalists or Tories, people who wanted to remain loyal to the British crown. The Daughters of Liberty were not as violent, but still a group of women who attempted to promote resistance against the British crown. They were formed in early 1766 when they were protesting the Stamp Act. These members took an active role in continued promotion of boycotting British goods. For example, they would refuse to buy British goods and encourage their friends to do the same, or they would try to make their own local versions of British goods. So in an attempt to avoid British tea, perhaps they made their own tea with local herbs and berries. They would try and create their own homespun cloth instead of buying British linens. So like in the picture, if you were a highborn woman, maybe you would hold a spinning bee, which is like a quilting circle or something today. You and your friends would get together and everyone would take a part in sewing a more local linen in an attempt to avoid the British-made product. All right, let's focus on Boston. After the Townshend Acts were all repealed with the exception of the tax on tea, Parliament's Prime Minister, Lord North, followed up with the Tea Act, which kept the tax on tea and gave a monopoly on the tea trade to a business called the British East India Company. A monopoly means that this company had total control over the American market for tea. No one else was allowed to make it, sell it, buy it. Only the British East India Company. By creating a monopoly and eliminating competition, the price of tea actually went down. Lord North hoped to that lowering the price would lead to compliance from the colonists in regard to tax. However, that did not work. The colonists were aware that the tax on tea was still included in the new lower price and attempted to resist in a multitude of ways. Activists advocated for boycotting all over the 13 colonies. British ships carrying the tea were met with threats of violence in almost all ports that usually convinced the ships to turn around. In Annapolis, Maryland, citizens burned a ship and the tea it carried in the water in the harbor of Maryland. But of course, the most famous protest against the Tea Act happens in Boston. The Boston Tea Party happens December 16th, 1773. A very, very cold night. The Massachusetts governor, Thomas Hutchinson, had allowed 3 ships carrying British tea to enter Boston Harbor. Those tea ships were boarded by members of the Sons of Liberty, who emptied 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor, which is worth about $1 million in value in today's money. The Sons of Liberty disguised themselves as Mohawk Indians, not to try and pass the blame onto different Native American groups, but in an attempt to disguise their own identities so they wouldn't get in trouble. In response to the Boston Tea Party, Britain and Parliament reacts to punish Boston by punishing Boston with a series of acts. They are called the coercive acts, which means to persuade, but Bostonians called them the intolerable acts, like they could not be tolerated. So they are designed to punish the city of Boston for the Boston Tea Party. The British government was fed up with colonial resistance. They thought that the destruction of the tea belonging to the British East India Company was unacceptable and that the citizens of Boston were simply criminals. So what the coercive acts did were to A, close Boston Harbor to hurt the economy of Massachusetts. Luckily, Bostonians were supported by people outside Massachusetts who sent supplies to the people of Boston to help support them. But in addition to closing Boston Harbor, in Massachusetts, town meetings were banned and the power of the royal governor was increased. So they're trying to eliminate the power and authority of the people of Massachusetts and increase the power and authority of the governor, who is selected by the king and no doubt a loyalist. And finally, British troops and officials who were accused of murder in Massachusetts would now be tried outside the colony in hopes for a more fair trial and a more lenient jury. So all of these laws are designed to harm and punish Boston and Massachusetts for the Boston Tea Party. All right, that concludes notes for Unit 2. Remember, tomorrow you need to Zoom with Miss Scanlon. Check the link in Schoology Updates, and I will send me messages if you need anything. I hope to see everybody soon. Thanks, bye.